it only seems fitting on the day of the new NCAA college football game dropping that we start the show off by asking what your all-time favorite video game is. So let me know in the comment section. I was thinking about my own answer for this question, and I'd probably have to go with kind of a vanilla answer, but I was addicted to FIFA in college. I probably missed one too many classes because I was playing FIFA. So for me, I'll say FIFA. Let me know what your favorite all-time favorite video game is down below. The day has finally come, Browns fans. Nick Chubb is back. We have been waiting for this day. We didn't know when it would come, but we knew we would get that video of Nick Chubb squatting the weight of the world, and that would be the absolute signal marker of, oh yeah, he's back, baby. I've been looking forward to this for a few months now, but we finally got a video from his own film production company, JCO Films, I think it is called, but we can kind of run through the pictures. I can't share the entire video because copyright laws, but it's on my Twitter, @MatthewPeterson. But you can see right there Nick Chubb going up, and he's got, 6 plates on each side, 12 altogether, 45 pounds a plate. We're looking at nearly 600 pounds being squatted here. Tex, let's run through one more time. Look at what Nick Chubb is absolutely demolishing here. This is a guy 8 months removed from a major knee injury, and he is squatting nearly 600 pounds in the middle of July, and we're 7 weeks away from week 1 against the Cowboys. Yeah, call me a believer in Nick Chubb being available week 1, because if he's doing this on July 15th, I think he's on a pretty good track to be available for the Browns in their home opener against the Cowboys. We will see Nick Chubb play week 1. That much I am sure about. I really am. Now, he probably won't be at 100% workload capacity, but if we're seeing this stuff out of him in July, I'm sure the Browns are going to be on the more caution side when training camp opens up in a week from now, but still, we are a long ways away until that September 8th home debut against the Cowboys. I'm feeling pretty good about Chubb playing week 1 against the Cowboys. Let's just run through the timeline one more time here, because it all goes back to last September when he suffered that major knee injury that we don't need to rehash anymore. And then he gets 2 surgeries in September, and the most recent one being in November, which is really when the start date for his rehab commences, because now he can begin working on the road to recovery. And November 19th, he's spotted at the home game against the Steelers on crutches. Fast forward to the road game in LA. He's off crutches walking around the Browns suite. April 13th is the next time we get a good scoop on Nick Chubb's progress. We were told he was running on land around that date. June 27th, we get a video of him working out. Not squatting 600 pounds, but a good video of him working out. And then today, July 15th, we get a video of him squatting about 585 pounds and making the bar look like a pool noodle. So now we get ready for July 23rd training camp at the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia, all leading up to week 1 against the Cowboys on September 8th. I'm super excited for Nick Chubb's return. Aren't we all? That's kind of a Captain Obvious speaking here. But Nick Chubb is one of the best human beings this franchise has ever been graced with. He's one of the best players in the National Football League. He's one of the most low-key guys. He's not a big attention-seeking player, so he kind of falls off some of the headlines from time to time. But Nick Chubb has been one of the best running backs in football since being drafted in 2018. I think he's a top 3 back in that time span. I think he is a shoo-in for having his jersey retired by the Browns, and if not for an injury, he could have very well been on a good path to go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and who knows, maybe he still can. Now, it's not going to be easy for him. Squatting 600 pounds is awesome for fans to see in July. It's good rah-rah type of pump-up, excitement videos to get us through the dog days of the off-season. But there have been some recent running backs who have come off major knee injuries that were not so fortunate the next year. Like last year, Javonte Williams, after suffering a similar knee injury in terms of multiple ligaments being torn, like Chubb in 2022, Javonte Williams in 2023 averages 3.6 yards a carry, 774 yards. Now, his recovery speed was near miraculous. Like, he was ready on the first day of training camp, and he suffered his injury similar to Chubb in the middle of the season, but even a little bit later. His came in October. Now, I don't think Nick Chubb is the same type of just physical specimen of Javonte Williams, J.K. Dobbins, and Gus Edwards, and this just speaks to how insane NFL athletes are, because those guys are insane athletes. I think Nick Chubb is probably more in the tier of Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles in terms of the build, speed, and strength, right? Just guys that were made in a lab, and every NFL player looks like they've been made in a lab, but these ones, like AP is AP. He rushed for over 2,000 yards a year after tearing his ACL at the end of the season and won the MVP award. Who does Nick Chubb remind you a little bit more of? Adrian Peterson or Gus Edwards? Like, for me, it's AP, and it should be AP for you as well. Chubb is just a different species. Like, I don't know how else to describe this. We're seeing a guy 8 months removed from a major knee surgery, the second major knee surgery, and he's squatting nearly 600 pounds. Last year, by the way, right around this time, he also dropped one of those infamous Nick Chubb squatting videos. That one was a little over 600 pounds. So he's only working his way up to his full capacity and his max speed. But I can't say I'm too surprised by this, because Nick Chubb, I feel like, had two signals during the offseason that he would be back sooner than later. And it caught me by surprise, because back in like January, I thought we might not get Nick Chubb until October, maybe a little bit closer to Halloween. And I love that I'm wrong on that, because Andrew Berry was the first one to maybe have some loose lips. When he was on the NFL Insider show with like Ian Rappaport and those guys, he said, one of the moments that we're all looking forward to is the first time he runs out of that home tunnel for his debut of the 2024 season. Andrew Berry is a smart guy, and he chose his words, I think, specifically here. His debut out of the home tunnel. So his debut for this year will come at home, and the Browns are at home week 1. I feel like Nick Chubb or Andrew Berry was signaling we might see Nick Chubb come out week 1. And then when Nick Chubb got his contract reworked, it was built in with a bunch of incentives. I don't think Chubb would have been on board with those incentives. Not that he may have had much leverage to begin with, but still, if he didn't feel like he'd be available for close to the entire season. That's a tough gamble to make if you know you're going to miss an extended period of time or just a couple of weeks. So, while I do think we're going to see Nick Chubb in September for sure, and maybe even as early as week 1, the only, even though I would love to be proven wrong on this, the only little tap of the brake I'll say is, when we see Nick Chubb, there may be a few weeks needed to get back to 100%. There may be a thing where we see Nick Chubb week 1 and he gets 10 to 12 carries. And the next week he gets 12 to 15. And he goes from there to 15 to 20. And then after 3 weeks, we start to see him in a usual workload. Although Nick Chubb has been through this experience before where he has to learn to retrust his knee. He suffered a similar serious knee injury in college, as we all know by now. And the next year at Georgia, he had the best year of his collegiate career. So he knows how to mentally get over this hurdle of, hey, can I run at that speed? Can I plant my leg like this? Can I change on a dime like this anymore? He's been through those mental hurdles before. So if anyone can overcome it a second time, it would be Chubb. So will we see Nick Chubb play week 1? Give me a yes or a no down below in the comment section. I think we will. I'm probably having a little bit too much of the Nick Chubb squatting Kool-Aid July 15th, and this probably just shows how hungry we are for football to get here. But yeah, mark me down as a believer. I can't wait to see Chubb run out of that home tunnel week 1 with the American flag or some type of flag, because you know he's going to be at the front of that Dawg Pound. All right, next up on the show, we want to talk about Wyatt Teller. He was on a podcast, the Go Long Touchdown podcast, and it was a really insightful and, long podcast, to be honest, like hour and 15-minute interview. They covered a wide variety of topics, from toughest defensive tackle to block, he said Chris Jones, to the exit with Baker Mayfield, to Deshaun Watson, to Bill Callahan. So it's a long interview. If you'd like to go watch it, I recommend so. I found it very entertaining and insightful. The Go Long TD podcast. But I do want to share some of the highlights with you guys here. So when Wyatt Teller was talking about Deshaun Watson, he had this to say. I would love to say he has glimpses of Patty Mahomes. Patty Mahomes is a once-in-a-lifetime guy. I mean, he's insane. And he has great outlets. He has great receivers. He has a great defense. He has all these different things around him to make him better. But he is the truth. I believe that Deshaun has that. I truly do. I've seen glimpses of it. So he's the helm of my team. I pray that he has an unbelievable season and honestly plays out of his mind. Not to win a Super Bowl, but just for himself. I truly believe that he's a great leader. When I saw this from Wyatt Teller, that made me much more comfortable about a lot of doubts and concerns I had from 2 years ago when the trade for Deshaun Watson was executed and Baker was done, and shortly after he would go down to Carolina. How would the locker room respond for moving on from a quarterback to help this franchise win their first playoff game in way too long to a quarterback that was in the midst of some major ongoing off-the-field legal issues? Like, sure, from a X's and O's or like just from a numbers perspective, you can see the upgrade from Baker to Deshaun Watson. But from a human standpoint, because football is not one on a spreadsheet, it's one with human beings in the locker room, how would that jive? And I think for Wyatt Teller, who was one of the closest friends with Baker Mayfield, Teller mentioned how his wife and Baker's wife are close friends, and they still are. Like, for him to come out and just say nothing but nice and kind things about Deshaun Watson and what a great leader he is, and also how when Watson got there in 2020, was it 2022? It's been 2 years now. The first thing he tried to do was start initiating hangouts with teammates, trying to get to know the guys, right? Where could have gone about that a handful of different ways, and that was kind of coming out of the COVID era of isolation and not hanging out with one another off the field and things like that, and all the rules that were put in place to prevent the spread of the disease and social distancing, yada yada yada. For Watson to come out and be like, hey, let's hang out, let's get to know one another, like, I think that was a great first step of him trying to bond with his new locker room and his new teammates. And I mean, he put that on in action by having a wide receiver workout session with his teammates in the Bahamas the first year. They went all over the place. So Watson, he had some work to do when it came to bonding and meshing with his new teammates. And the guys up front, the offensive line, like, you may not think quarterback, offensive line, best buds, because usually you think of the quarterback wide receiver connection. Like, that's always like the tandem we talk about. You know what I mean? Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, stuff like that. But the offensive line, those are the guys that keep you healthy. So for Watson to earn the respect and the trust of those players, that was really nice to hear from a player, because that's just stuff that you don't get to see on the field on Sundays. Like, there's no stat that tells you whether or not the offensive line believes that Deshaun Watson is a great leader for this team. So for a player that was really close with the previous quarterback to come out and just say nothing but nice things, which, sure, he wasn't going to bash his new quarterback, in a podcast, but he really went above and beyond when talking about Watson. So for me, I just found that part kind of reaffirming, okay, this is the guy that this locker room needs and is rallying around and believes in. Now, we're going to look at more stuff from the Wyatt Teller interview in just a moment, but we're trying to reach 35,000 subscribers here on the channel. We're 169, I know, nice, away from reaching that big number. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you are not already. Now, Teller did talk about Baker. He had this to say. I love Baker, and I think Baker has matured enough to where he would even say this. I truly believe when they were talking to Deshaun, if Baker just said, hey, man, it's going to be okay, I have one more year on my deal, everything's going to be okay, and just played, I truly believe he still would have been the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. I don't know how every conversation went. I have no idea. But I'm just saying he was beloved in Cleveland by the ownership, by the team, by the coaches, by the players, everybody, by the fans. So I think that he should have let calmer heads prevail. I don't agree with this thought. And I don't like when I disagree with players about the NFL in general, because naturally you think they know a lot more about their own profession in their league than we do, since they live and breathe it every single day. But I do think this is a good example of sometimes players are players, and they may not have the best inner workings of how the rest of the league operates. Like, for example, I don't think players are the most knowledgeable about other players because they don't get to watch them as much as you and I do. Like, they only get to watch themselves on Sunday. They are busy playing in one of the games that we have on our Red Zone Octobox. So we get a much better vantage point of watching all the different teams and all the different players, whereas I'm not even convinced that these players are watching like Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football. Like, they're probably resting a little bit and maybe even just wanting a little bit of a break from football because that's all they do. So when they get a night off, they may not want to sit down for 3.5 hours of Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels. So I think this is a prime example of not like a player doesn't know how the league works, but I don't think that they have the best conceptualization of how the offseason trades and free agency and that stuff kind of works. And even in season at times, because there was no way Nick Chubb, I beg your pardon, there was no way Baker was going to come back when the Browns were public about pursuing Deshaun Watson. Like, there's just no way you pass the point of no return, right? I don't see any path where if the Browns failed to get Deshaun Watson, they could go back to Baker and go, listen, I know we were just very public about trying to find your replacement, and you laid it out for us last year, and we're going after a guy who's got a bit of a spotted record at the moment with his off-the-field issues, but do you mind playing for it? Like, that's just going to be a tough elephant in the room to get past. So I don't agree that with cooler heads that Baker could have returned. No. The Browns, they knew what they were doing when they set off to get Deshaun Watson, and we'll never know really what plan B, if Watson picked like the Falcons or the Saints or some other team was for Cleveland, but I don't think it was Baker Mayfield. Now, the last thing I want to get to from this interview he talked about offensive line coach Bill Callahan. And I found these comments to be very interesting and kind of surprising. So Teller, when talking about Bill Callahan, said, after that season, Bill in our exit interviews, this was after the 2023 season, Bill in our exit interviews was basically saying that I'm not a very good player. And I'm like, thank you, coach. I appreciate you. Yes, sir. Personally, I'll just add in, I earned a ton of respect, which I already had a lot of for Wyatt Teller, because the guy is just an absolute like football monster, and he's one of the toughest SOBs, and that really showed even just in an interview, and the respect he has for his coaches and his military background and whatnot. But you got to wonder, when Bill Callahan's doing an exit interview with Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, and he's praised as the best offensive line coach in the National Football League, and he says to Wyatt Teller, in more words than this, you're not very good, and then Bill Callahan leaves for the Titans and their draft rolls around, I wonder if that thought stuck with Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, and that's what kind of prompted the Zach Zinter selection. If they felt like, whoa, did we just get a bit of a warning? Like, our awesome old offensive line coach just said, this guy's not very good. He's got 1 year left on his deal, and it's got a big cap hit. We have an opportunity to reset here in round number 3. Should we do that? It makes you wonder, that's for sure. Now, I don't really agree with Wyatt Teller being bad. I'm not going to ever disagree with Bill Callahan on the offensive line. He knows 100 times more than I ever will. But if you just want to go off Pro Football Focus, which maybe this is just a good reminder that PFF is not the end-all, be-all for evaluating players, but it's definitely a good tool or a good starting point. He was ranked 13th out of 79 qualifying guards, so do with that what you will. But we can look at another piece of information from this Wyatt Teller interview, because he talked about the new offensive line coach, Andy Dickerson, which we'll get to in just a moment. But first, if you want to get these Browns polos, they're 40% off at chatsports.com/Browns polos. I put this link in the comments and description of today's video. So check it out today. Get some new Browns gear in your wardrobe while saving 40% off by using our exclusive link. So when Wyatt Teller was talking about new offensive line coach Andy Dickerson, he had this to say. I'm just seeing an open sense of communication with Andy and Roy, and it's a season that I'm actually excited for. I'm actually excited. And usually it was like, I got to go spend 30 days with Bill and then 5 days every week being told that, not that you suck, but hey, you're not doing it right. You got to work harder. But that also being said, that made me a hell of a good player. I was a little surprised to hear Wyatt Teller kind of talk about how excited he was, as if he wasn't excited for previous seasons. Now, maybe working under Bill Callahan every single day of the week is miserable. He could be one of those bosses that just push you really, really hard, and it's not till after the process is over you look back and you're like, I'm so grateful for that type of boss, teacher, mentor, whatever it may be. So no denying that working under Bill Callahan is probably a pain in the butt, but Wyatt Teller was very open about how tough Bill was on him, despite Teller being very available for this team last year. Didn't miss a game. I mean, they sat him and all the other starters in that Week 18 finale against the Bengals. But from Teller's perspective, he's like, I just played every single snap for you, and all you have to say is, I suck and I can do better at this. Like, I can see how that would be frustrating for a player to hear. But I'm excited to hear and see what Andy Dickerson can bring to the table, because not that moving on from Bill Callahan was a good thing, but maybe some fresh thoughts and just a new kind of energy and a fresh start a little bit can be good for everyone involved and bring some new ideas and, I don't know, just different aura and vibe to the room altogether. All right, I've taken way too much of your time today. So if you are excited for week 1 against the Cowboys and Nick Chubb running out of that tunnel, drop a CLE for me down below in the comment section. While you're doing that, we will pick a card to wrap up the show. I've got producer Matthew McCullough hanging out with me today. Big Tex, which card do you want to go with?
Let me go with the Ace of Spades.
Ooh, Ace of Spades. I like the choice. Good order at Torchy's, if you know, you know. I'm going to go with the 6 of Clubs. What'd you say? Ace of Clubs. That is a tough scene right there. Ace of Clubs. All right, that will do it for us on today's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your Monday and your week, and we'll see everyone later.